The look on my husband's face when he finally saw me, standing there in the firelight of that ridiculously expensive restaurant, was a masterpiece. It was a perfect, silent, and exquisitely rendered portrait of a man who has just realized that the beautiful, shiny, new life he had so proudly upgraded to was owned, lock, stock, and barrel, by the dowdy, boring old wife he had just thrown away. Hi everyone, I'm Grandma Elizabeth. My name is Elizabeth Sterling. I'm 75 years old, and for the past year, my home has been here, in a quiet apartment in the sky. Though, for 49 years before that, my life, my home, my entire world, was a beautiful, rambling old house in the suburbs of Chicago. A house that I loved, and a house that I, in the end, was very happy to leave behind. This story, my goodness, this is a secret I have held in my heart like a winning poker hand. It is the story of a 50-year partnership, a story of a quiet, methodical, and soul-crushing betrayal, and a story of a single, perfect, and I must confess, deeply, deeply satisfying moment of revenge. My own son, my dear, beloved son, was there that night. He saw the explosion. But even he does not know the full, intricate, and carefully orchestrated truth. He knows his father was a fool. He does not know that I, his quiet, warring mother, was the one who arranged the board, set the trap, and in the end declared checkmate. There is a particular kind of humiliation, you see, that is reserved for the older wife. The wife who is traded in for a newer model. You are made to feel obsolete, a piece of outdated technology. And the shame of it is a quiet, creeping poison. You start to see yourself through his eyes. You see the wrinkles, the gray hairs, the comfortable, worn-in quality of a long life, not as badges of honor, but as marks of failure. You start to believe his narrative, that you are no longer exciting, no longer relevant. And that is the most dangerous betrayal of all. But I am telling my story now because I have finally and completely shed that narrative. I have learned that a woman's value is not determined by the gaze of a foolish man, but by the quiet, steady, and often unseen work of her own mind. And I am telling it for any woman, or any man, who has ever been made to feel like they have passed their expiration date. Before I begin this difficult, and I must admit, rather delicious story, I would be so very grateful for your kindness. My heart still beats a little faster when I think of that night. Please, take a moment to like this video and subscribe to our channel. Your support, your presence, it is a great comfort. It gives this old woman this strength to finally pull up a chair to the table and show the world the hand I was holding all along. Thank you, my dears. My story, our story, began not with money, but with books. We met in a dusty, wonderful university library. I was a quiet, serious girl studying business and economics, a girl from a simple, middle-class family with a scholarship and a fierce, burning ambition to build a life of my own. He, my David, was a brilliant, charismatic young law student, a boy from a similar background with a hunger for success that was as sharp and as bright as a new-minted dime. We were not a glamorous couple. We were a team, a partnership of pure, unadulterated ambition. Our dates were not to fancy restaurants. They were long, caffeine-fueled study sessions in the library, our books spread out under the dim green glow of the reading lamps. Our love was built on a foundation of shared dreams, of a mutual, and I must admit, a rather ruthless desire to conquer the world. He was the brilliant, charming visionary, and I was the quiet, methodical, and deeply practical strategist. He was the beautiful, soaring kite, and I was the invisible string, holding him to the earth, giving him the tension he needed to fly. I remember the night we started our company. It wasn't in a grand boardroom. It was in that tiny, cramped kitchen. He had a brilliant idea, a revolutionary idea for the time. A company that would create high-end, architectural lighting, not for commercial spaces, but for the home. He had the vision, the charisma, the legal knowledge. But he had no head for the practicalities, for the slow, boring, an absolutely essential work of building a business from the ground up. "It's a $1 million idea, Liz," he'd said, his eyes shining with that familiar, brilliant fire. "But I don't know where to start. The numbers, the logistics, it's a nightmare." I didn't say a word. I just poured him a cup of coffee, and I went to work. I sat at that kitchen table for a solid week, and I wrote the business plan. I did the market research. I built the financial projections. I created the entire, practical, and brutally realistic blueprint for his beautiful, airy dream. He had looked at the finished plan, a thick 50-page document, with a look of pure, unadulterated awe. He took my hands that were smudged with ink, and he held them to his lips. "You are my secret weapon, Elizabeth Sterling," he'd whispered. "The world will see me, the brilliant frontman, but you are the architect. You are the foundation. And without you, it is all just a pretty dream." In that moment, I had never felt so seen, so loved, so essential. We built our company, Sterling Lighting, on that foundation. We were equal partners, 50-50, a fact that was documented in the incorporation papers I had drawn up myself. For the first 20 years, it was a true and beautiful partnership. He was the face of the company, the brilliant, charming salesman who wooed the clients and the investors. I was the silent, unseen engine. I was the one who managed the books, who ran the factory, who handled the payroll. I was the one who turned his brilliant, beautiful, and often chaotic ideas into a solid, profitable, and growing reality. We bought our beautiful home in the suburbs. We had our son, our dear Robert. We built a successful and deeply, deeply happy life. I was not just his wife. I was his partner, his equal, the architect of his success. The change, when it came, was not a sudden, violent storm. It was a slow, almost imperceptible erosion. It began when the company became not just a success, but an empire. When David Sterling, the brilliant builder, became David Sterling, the visionary CEO, he started spending more time not in the factory, but on airplanes, at conferences, in the glossy pages of design magazines. He started wearing suits that cost more than my first car. He started living in a world that was no longer ours, but his. He never stopped loving me, but he stopped seeing me. He forgot about the girl in the cramped kitchen. He forgot about the woman who had written the business plan that had launched his entire world. He began to believe his own beautiful, heroic myth, the myth of the solitary genius. And I, the silent partner, the invisible foundation, I became a part of the set dressing of his grand life. The quiet, supportive, and in his mind, increasingly boring and domestic wife who had, by some great stroke of luck, happened to be there at the beginning. The 30 years that followed were a masterclass in the art of becoming a footnote in one's own life story. As Sterling Lighting grew into an international powerhouse, the story of its founding, the one David told to the world, was slowly, methodically, and brilliantly rewritten. The story of the girl in the cramped kitchen, the girl who wrote the business plan, was quietly edited out. It was replaced by a more romantic, more heroic, and more convenient myth. The myth of the lone, visionary genius who had built an empire from nothing but a dream. So David, the young, eager journalist, would ask, how did it all begin? What was the spark? And David, my brilliant, charismatic husband, would lean back in his chair, a look of fond, nostalgic reminiscence on his face. It began with a single, simple idea, he would say, his voice a low, charming rumble. And a woman, my beautiful wife Elizabeth. I saw her, and I knew I had to build a world that was worthy of her. I built it all for her. It was a beautiful story. It was a lie. He had not built it for me. He had built it with me. But the story of the great man, inspired by his beautiful muse, was a better story, a more marketable story. So, that became the official history. And I became the muse, a silent, supportive, and beautiful object of his inspiration. I would sit through those interviews, a serene, proud smile on my face, and I would feel a quiet, cold, and terrible little death in my own heart. But I would say nothing. I loved him, and I had learned over many years that his ego was the most fragile and the most essential part of the entire sterling lighting empire. To challenge his story would have been to challenge him, and that was a price I was not yet willing to pay. So, I played my part. I became the perfect CEO's wife. I ran our beautiful home with a quiet, military precision. I raised our son. I hosted the perfect dinner parties. I was the silent, unacknowledged, but absolutely essential partner in his continued success. He was the brilliant, public face of the company. I was the private, invisible, and utterly indispensable foundation upon which his entire world was built. And he had no idea. He had forgotten. Our son, Robert, grew up in the shadow of his father's great success. He is a good man, a kind man, but he is not a fighter. He is a quiet, gentle soul, a history professor who has always been slightly intimidated by his father's larger-than-life personality. He saw the same story the rest of the world saw, the brilliant, powerful father, and the quiet, supportive, and loving mother. He never questioned it. The final, brutal, and world-shattering act of my 50-year-long erasure began, as I imagine it so often does, with a younger woman. But she was not a secret. She was not a sordid, back-alley affair. That would have been too common, too vulgar, for a man like my husband. No. His betrayal was, like everything else in his life, a grand, public, and beautifully executed performance. And the woman, my God, the woman was a masterpiece. Her name was Anna, and she was the daughter of a man my husband had been trying to do business with for years, a reclusive and obscenely wealthy tech billionaire. She was 28 years old, a brilliant, wild, and celebrated artist. She was everything I was not. She was not quiet. She was not supportive. She was not a foundation. She was a firework. And my husband, my 74-year-old husband, a man who had grown bored with his own perfect, quiet kingdom, was utterly, completely, and hopelessly dazzled by her. He did not hide her. He flaunted her. He took her to our favorite restaurants. He brought her to our box at the symphony. He introduced her to our friends, not as his mistress, but as his protégée, his artistic muse. It was a lie so audacious, so public, so utterly contemptuous of me, and of our 50 years together, that it left me breathless. My friends would call, their voices full of a pitying, horrified concern. My son, my dear, gentle Robert, was devastated. He tried to talk to his father, but David was a man who was deaf to any voice but his own ego. And I did nothing. I said nothing. I remained a perfect, elegant, and silent wife. I greeted her with a serene, polite smile when he brought her to our home. I complimented her art. I played the part of the sophisticated, modern, and completely oblivious wife to perfection. He thought my silence was acceptance. He thought it was weakness. He thought I was a relic, a woman from a bygone era who would simply endure. He had no idea that my silence was not the silence of a victim. It was the silence of a predator. It was the silence of a chess master, watching her opponent make a series of foolish, arrogant, and ultimately fatal moves. The final, unforgivable move, the move that would finally bring the long, quiet game to its explosive and public end, came on the day he asked me for a divorce. He did it with a terrible, and I must admit, a beautiful kindness. He did not shout. He did not accuse. He spoke of his profound respect for me, of his deep and abiding gratitude for our 50 years together. "You are the mother of my child, Elizabeth," he said, his voice thick with a genuine, if deeply selfish, emotion. "You are the woman who helped me build my life, and I will always, always love you for that." He told me he was in love with Anna. He told me that she had reawakened his soul. He told me that he had, for the first time in 30 years, found a true partner, a true equal. An equal. The irony of it was a knife in my heart. And then he said the words that would, in the end, cost him everything. "I am upgrading, my love," he said, and he said it without a trace of irony. "It is not a reflection on you. You are a masterpiece of a bygone era, a classic. But I am a man who has always needed to live on the cutting edge, and Anna, she is the future." He then laid out his generous, and in his mind perfectly fair divorce settlement. I would get the house, of course, a generous alimony, a small, non-voting, and purely financial stake in the company. He would keep the business, his empire, his life's work. He would, in short, be allowed to take our shared past and use it to fund his shiny new future. I listened. I nodded. And when he was finished, I said only one thing. "I will think about it, David," I said. He was so relieved, so grateful for my quiet, dignified acceptance. He had no idea that I was not thinking about his offer. I was thinking about a 50-year-old incorporation document, filed away in a dusty box in our lawyer's office. I was thinking about a 50-50 partnership, and I was thinking about the beautiful, poetic, and exquisitely brutal irony of the fact that the reclusive tech billionaire father of his new, shiny future was a man I had secretly, and through a series of private, anonymous investment funds, been the primary financial backer of for the past 10 years. He thought he was upgrading to a new dynasty. He had no idea that the dynasty he was trying to marry into was one that I, his dowdy, boring, and outdated wife, already owned. The trap was set. The board was arranged. And the final, beautiful, and very public checkmate was just a few days away. The week after he asked me for a divorce was the strangest of my life. I was a stranger in my own home, a ghost at my own table. He was so grateful for my quiet, dignified acceptance of his betrayal. He treated me with a new, gentle, and deeply patronizing kindness. The kindness of a benevolent king towards a deposed, but still respected queen. He thought he was being generous. He had no idea that I was not a deposed queen. I was a general, quietly, methodically, and with a cold, clear fury, preparing for war. My son, Robert, was a wreck. He was heartbroken for me and furious with his father. He wanted us to scream, to shout, to fight. "How can you be so calm, Mom?" he had asked me, his voice a choked whisper of rage and grief. "He is destroying our family. He is humiliating you. We have to do something." And I, the woman who is about to do something so devastating it would shatter his entire world, had to look at my sweet, loving son, and I had to lie. "Your father and I, we have had a long and beautiful life together, Robert," I said, my voice a calm, sad, and perfectly rehearsed melody. "And sometimes stories just end. My only concern now is for this to be as quiet and as painless and as dignified as possible. For the sake of the family." He did not understand, of course. But he trusted me. He saw his mother, a woman of immense dignity and grace, choosing the high road. He had no idea that the high road I was on was a quiet, secret path that led directly to the heart of his father's empire. My war began not with a shout, but with a series of quiet, discreet, and perfectly legal phone calls. I was not just a useless wife. I was a 50%, legally documented partner in Sterling Lighting, and I was about to call in my markers. I assembled my army. It was not an army of soldiers, but of lawyers. The best, most ruthless corporate litigators in the state. I did not tell them the whole, sordid, emotional story. I did not tell them about the affair. I told them only one thing. "My husband and I are separating," I said, my voice as calm and as cold as the glass and steel boardroom we were sitting in. "And we are dividing our assets. I am here to ensure that the division is equitable." For the next 2 weeks, while David was busy planning his new shiny life with his new shiny lover, my team and I were quietly, methodically, and with a terrifying precision, conducting a full financial and legal autopsy of the empire he thought was his alone. We reviewed the original incorporation documents, the ones that proved my 50% ownership. We reviewed the 50 years of tax returns, the ones that documented my role as a salaried executive partner. We documented the true and staggering value of the company I had helped build. And then there was the matter of Anna's father, the reclusive tech billionaire, my secret investment. 10 years ago, I had seen the potential in his small, obscure data security startup. Acting through a series of anonymous private trusts, I had become his first and largest angel investor. I owned a significant controlling stake in his now multi-billion-dollar company, a fact that he, a man who valued his privacy above all else, and I, a woman who understood the power of a hidden asset, had kept a perfect and mutually beneficial secret. Anna, his daughter, his wild, artistic, and deeply beloved daughter, she had no idea. She was a trust fund baby who had never once in her life had to look at a balance sheet. She had no idea that the quiet, boring, and outdated old woman her new lover was so carelessly discarding was, in fact, her own father's secret and most powerful business partner. The final piece of my plan was the most delicate and the most important. It was my daughter, not my son, my daughter-in-law to be. The beautiful, fiery, and utterly clueless firework who was at the center of this entire sordid mess. I invited her to lunch. Just the two of us. It was a masterpiece of a performance. I was the graceful, accepting, and heartbroken older woman seeking a quiet, civilized transition. Anna, my dear, I began, my voice full of a sad, gentle warmth. I know this is an awkward situation, but I want you to know that I hold no ill will towards you, my husband and I. We have been living separate lives for a very long time, and he deserves to be happy. You make him happy, and for that, I am grateful. She was so relieved, so grateful. She had expected a hysterical, weeping, and accusatory old woman. Instead, she got a graceful, understanding, and deeply sophisticated new friend. And I wanted to ask you for a favor, I continued. Anything, Elizabeth, she said, her eyes shining with a genuine, if naive, sincerity. My husband, I said, is a proud man. He is a great man. And he is a man who is terrified of pity. The story of our separation, I want it to be a quiet, private, and dignified one. But I have a son who is, as you can imagine, heartbroken and furious. I'm afraid of what he will do, of the scene he will make when the news becomes public. Die? I let that hang in the air for a moment. I had just presented her with a problem that would threaten the perfect, beautiful, and seamless beginning of her new life with David. What I would like, I said, is for the four of us, you, me, David, and my son, Robert, to have a quiet, civilized dinner, a final dinner, a passing of the torch, if you will. A chance for me to show my son that I am all right, that I accept this, and that we are all going to move forward as a new, modern, and civilized family. It was the perfect bait. It appealed to her sense of drama, of romance, of her own central importance in this great, sweeping love story. She was not just the other woman. She was the peacemaker, the healer, the one who would gracefully, beautifully, and publicly unite the old family with the new. Of course, she breathed, her face alight with the glory of her own magnanimity. It's a beautiful idea, Elizabeth. I will arrange it. And so the stage was set. The final, public, and exquisitely crafted execution was scheduled. She chose the restaurant, of course. The most expensive, most exclusive, and most public restaurant in the city. She reserved the best table, the one in the center of the room, by the fire. She thought she was setting the stage for her own coronation. She had no idea she was, in fact, sending out the invitations to her own public beheading. The restaurant was a masterpiece of understated, and therefore overwhelming, wealth. It was a place designed for quiet, important conversations, a place where deals were made and dynasties were forged. Anna, in her youthful arrogance, had chosen the perfect stage for what she believed would be her own social coronation. She had no idea she had, in fact, chosen the perfect execution chamber. I had arrived early with my son, my poor, dear Robert. He was a wreck. He was torn between his loyalty to me and his deep, abiding love for the idealized image of his father. "Mother, I don't understand this," he whispered, his voice a low, frantic murmur as he straightened his tie for the 10th time. "A dinner? With her? How can you do this? How can you sit at a table with the woman who has destroyed our family?" I looked at my son, and my heart ached for him. He was a good man, a gentle soul, and he was about to be a casualty in a war he didn't even know he was fighting. "Because, Robert," I said, and my voice was calm and steady, a rock in his sea of emotional turmoil. "It is the civilized thing to do. And because, tonight, your father is going to be faced with a choice. And I want you to be here to witness it." And then, they arrived. He walked into that room as if he owned it. He was a king. He smiled, his brilliant, charming smile. He waved to a business acquaintance at a nearby table. He was performing, and he was magnificent. And on his arm was his prize. His upgrade. Anna was breathtaking. She wore a simple, brutally expensive red dress that was the color of a fresh wound, and around her neck, a simple, elegant diamond necklace I had never seen before. A new gift, no doubt. They came to our table. David leaned down and kissed my cheek, a gesture of fond proprietorial affection. "Elizabeth, my love," he said, his voice a low, charming rumble. "You look beautiful tonight." He was a master. Even now, in the midst of his great betrayal, he was still the charming, loving husband. The dinner was a masterpiece of quiet, civilized, and soul-crushing torture. The conversation was a brittle, glittering web of polite, meaningless words. We spoke of the weather, of art, of a new play that had just opened in the city. We did not speak of the 20 years of lies, of the broken hearts, of the shattered life that lay, like a ghost, between us. David and Anna were a brilliant team. They were so happy, so in love. They finished each other's sentences. They laughed at each other's jokes. They were a perfect, public performance of a great, sweeping, and utterly fraudulent love story. And I, and my poor silent son, were their captive audience. Robert just sat there, his food untouched, his face a mask of pale, miserable grief. And I played my part. I smiled. I asked polite questions. I was the picture of a graceful, dignified, and utterly defeated woman. And then, as the dessert plates were being cleared, I knew it was time. I had arranged it with the restaurant manager earlier that day. I gave him a small, almost imperceptible nod. The lights in the restaurant dimmed slightly. A hush fell over the room. A single spotlight, from a hidden fixture in the ceiling, illuminated our table. David looked around, a look of amused surprise on his face. "Well," he said with a chuckle, "it seems we are the center of attention." Anna smiled, a small, triumphant smile. She thought this was a part of her perfect, curated evening. And then, a woman, a well-dressed woman, walked to our table. My daughter, Anna. But not the Anna he knew. Not the wild, artistic, trust fund baby. This was Anna Sterling, CEO of Sterling Technologies, the most powerful and private woman in the world of tech. And she was not smiling. "Good evening, David," she said, her voice as cold and as clean as polished steel. She did not look at him. She looked at me. "Mother," she said, with a small, respectful nod. "You called for me." I did not wait for his answer. There was no answer to give. I had not presented him with a negotiation. I had presented him with a beautifully executed and legally ironclad checkmate. He was a king who had been stripped of his crown, his army, and his castle, all in a single quiet and devastatingly public move. His carefully constructed world, his heroic myth, his shiny new future, it had all turned to dust, right there, in the middle of the most expensive restaurant in the city. I stood up. I looked at my son, Robert, and I gave him a small, sad, and almost imperceptible nod. A signal. It is done. You are free. Iorn, Nidhas. And then I walked away. I did not run. I did not storm out. I walked, with the same quiet, steady, and dignified grace with which I had lived my entire life. I walked past the tables of stunned, silent diners, the most powerful people in the city, who were now the audience to the greatest performance of my life. I walked out of that restaurant and into the cool night air of a new and unknown world. And I did not look back. The aftermath was, I am told, a thing of quiet, brutal efficiency. David did not fight. He had no fight left in him. To fight would have been to expose himself to the full, devastating force of my legal arsenal. He was a proud man, and he chose a quiet, private ruin over a loud, public one. He signed the papers. He took the house and the alimony. He lost the company that had been his identity, his life's work, the very engine of his magnificent ego. Sterling Lighting was, and is, now mine. Anna, the beautiful, fiery, and ultimately foolish upgrade. She did not stay. Of course she didn't. A deposed king with a shattered fortune and a broken spirit was not the man she had fallen in love with. The dynasty she had so cleverly married into had turned out to be a mirage. She left him within the month. Her father, the reclusive tech billionaire, my secret business partner, was not pleased. I am told her financial future is not as bright as she had once imagined it would be. My son, my dear, gentle Robert, is healing. The truth of his father's character was a terrible, bitter pill for him to swallow. But in the ashes of his idealized image, he has found a new and quieter strength. He is the chairman of the charitable foundation I have established, in his grandfather's name, a foundation funded by the profits of the company he and I now run together. We are a team again. A different kind of team. A quieter, more honest one. And David, my husband of 50 years? He lives in the beautiful house we once shared. Alone. A king in an empty castle, haunted by the ghost of the foundation he never saw, and the quiet, boring architect who had, in the end, proven to be the true master of the game. I learned the hardest lesson a woman can learn, that a life, a true and equal partnership, is a delicate and complex piece of architecture. And if one person is allowed to take all the credit for its beautiful facade, they will eventually forget about the quiet, unseen, and absolutely essential foundation. And a house without a foundation, no matter how beautiful, will, in the end, inevitably come crashing down. He did not mean to be cruel. He just forgot. He forgot the girl in the cramped kitchen. He forgot the woman who had written his first business plan. He forgot that his empire was built not on a single heroic pillar, but on two. And his final terrible betrayal was not just an act of infidelity. It was an act of profound, and in the end, catastrophic amnesia. So, if you are out there and you feel that you are the invisible foundation in someone else's grand life, please remember this old woman. Do not wait 50 years. Do not wait for them to forget you. Quietly, methodically, and with all the strength you possess, remind them that you are there. Remind them that without you, their entire beautiful world would turn to dust. Thank you for letting me share this very strategic story with you. It is a good reminder, I think, that it is never too late to become the architect of your own, new, and beautiful life. If you have found strength in this tale, please take a moment to like this video, subscribe to our channel, and turn on that little notification bell so you don't miss what comes next. And in the comments below, I would love for you to share a story about a time you rediscovered your own essential and foundational strength. Love you all. This is Grandma Elizabeth, and I'll see you in the next story.